Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video we're taking a look at a pretty cool underrated Pokemon in the Master Premier Cup, and that Pokemon is Shadow Conkeldurr. Now these battles were submitted to the channel by a member of the community, Rob, so many thanks for the battle submission. Shadow Conkeldurr at the start of the season got access to Force Palm, an incredibly powerful fast move. Paired up with Legacy Brutal Swing and Dynamic Punch, this gives Shadow Conkeldurr surprisingly decent neutrals in the Master Premier meta. Now I did try the regular Conkeldurr and was pretty underwhelmed, but with the extra damage from Shadow, the Shadow Conkeldurr actually looks like a pretty nice threat. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches. We see a very neutral lead in the first match, Metagross into Dragonite. Opponent's going to be save switching out, they're going to send in their own Metagross, and he's going to bank a massive amount of energy and then bring in Golisopod. Golisopod is another pretty interesting anti-meta Pokemon. Golisopod, even though Fury Cutter only hits for neutral damage into Metagross, it does do the same damage per turn as Shadow Claw, meaning that the matchup should be largely unchanged. There is a pretty massive stat product difference here between Golisopod and Metagross, so even with the typing advantage, I imagine that Metagross can probably make life uncomfortable. Metagross is able to absorb that damage, send back in the Dragonite, and get a full farm down. But this is where all the energy on the Metagross is going to get very awkward for the opponent. Meteor Mash lands, that's very nice damage, but Dragonite will barely be able to outpace. Thunder Punch, Superpower, neither will take the knockout. Metagross able to hang on, immediately under-tapping the Meteor Mash, forcing the Dragonite to give up a shield or just get KO'd. Dragonite is going to fall. What is the opponent going to have in the back as their final Pokemon? It's going to be a Rhyperior, and in comes Shadow Conkeldurr. Conkeldurr's Force Palms are erasing this Rhyperior's health bar. Rhyperior will go for the Drill Run, but my goodness, this damage is just absolutely ludicrous. Conkeldurr is going to farm up, now just going to start firing off Brutal Swings. Brutal Swing is going to be shielded by the Rhyperior. Another Mud Slap goes through, as Conkeldurr should be able to grab the final Protect Shield. Rhyperior is just going to get fully farmed down by the Force Palms. They will be able to grab the final Protect Shield with the Drill Run, and then all they have left in the back is the very low health Metagross. Metagross is able to throw one Shadow Claw, making the Meteor Mash on damage registration error, but even this will not be enough to save them, as the Metagross comes back into the mirror, has the health advantage, gets the Shadow Claw down, and takes the Game 1 win. Hopping into game number 2, Metagross into Florges, an incredible lead. Opponent save switches into Gyarados, and this is honestly a little bit of an awkward matchup. There's not really a Pokemon in the back that wants to deal with Gyarados. Metagross will fire off the Meteor Mash, getting some very nice chip damage, and now that the Gyarados is chipped, suddenly the matchup looks pretty decent for Golisopod. Gyarados is able to land the Twister, that's pretty good damage onto the Golisopod. Golisopod will be able to absorb Twister number 2 as well, and still not even be in the red health. Well, after a couple Dragon Breaths, it's going to get pretty close. This Aqua Jet will not take the knockout either. Switch advantage is actually pretty important in this game, so I wouldn't be surprised to see Golisopod put up the shield and try and go for the Fury Cutter down. The Fury Cutters are really not doing much against Gyarados. This is going to be close. Golisopod commits and is barely able to get the farm down with fractional HP remaining. Back in comes the Florges. Florges never going to be respecting an Aqua Jet because they know there are Meteor Mashes in their future. So Golisopod is going to fall. Back in comes the Metagross in the back. Oh no, it's King Gambit! And King Gambit is just getting melted. In comes Conkeldurr. Opponent sees the writing on the wall and concedes the match. We move to the next match as Metagross leads into Shadow Gyarados. The Shadow Gyarados does take a massive amount of damage from resistant Meteor Mash. Metagross just going to go straight forward, Meteor Mash lands, and it turns out that was actually a CMP tie. Even if it's the crunch, Metagross will be able to hang on, it's just going to be the Aqua Tail. Metagross farms up, oh that's a very nice play, able to save the Metagross and catch the Aqua Tail onto Golisopod where it's going to be resisted. Unfortunately, the fun's over for Golisopod as out comes Gholdengo. Gholdengo double resists Fury Cutter, there's basically no fast move pressure here, and Aqua Jet won't do a ton of damage. Gholdengo actually ends up putting up the Protect Shield, so my guess is they're probably just going to farm to 100 and then fire off the Power Gem or the Shadow Ball to secure the knockout. Aqua Jet is going to land. Gholdengo, oh no, they accidentally farm over 100 energy. I believe they did 9 hexes there, and Shadow Ball is going to be securing the knockout. Metagross will have to immediately give the shield right back though, because Gholdengo did overfarm to the max back-to-back Shadow Balls. So Metagross will put up the shield. Hexes won't do a lot of damage, but the opponent's going to pivot back and send in the Shadow Gyarados. The no shield Metagross, I believe, can hang on here. It's not going to be by much, maybe setting up a Force Palm down. There it is! In comes Shadow Conkeldurr. Able to get 2 Force Palms to pick up the knockout. Conkeldurr now up quite a lot of energy, and if the opponent brings back in the Gholdengo, Gholdengo's not going to have a fun time dealing with Brutal Swings, but it's going to be a Garchomp Garchomp that gets brought in. It's a Dragon Tail Garchomp at that, and Garchomp is going to be winning charge attack priority. Garchomp fires off the Twister. The shield comes up from Conkeldurr as Conkeldurr looks to hit back hard with Dynamic Punch. Oh, they end up no shielding. Can Conkeldurr get the farm down? Maybe not, as the opponent pivots out and brings back in Gholdengo. But the Gholdengo should be completely energy dry. Brutal Swing will get the shield. Can he make another Brutal Swing? Yes, he can. Able to outpace the Gholdengo. And the opponent realizes there's just no beating this Conkeldurr. They tried to call a bait there, trying to no-shield a Brutal Swing, but that Dynamic Punch landing was game-winning. Great lead in the next match, Metagross into Togekiss. Opponent threw one peck, save switch into Metagross, and it appears Golisopod is not going to be the counter switch here. Instead, just going to stay in, no-shield the Meteor Mash, and bring out Conkeldurr. Potentially make it a team read that the Golisopod is going to be the key to victory in the back. Conkeldurr will put up the Protect Shield, but Conkeldurr not having Stone Edge to threaten the Togekiss when it re-hits the field could make things a little bit uncomfortable. Conkeldurr going to go for an undercharge on the Brutal Swing. Brutal Swing is going to set up a perfect farm down. Very nice undercharge there. And as the opponent brings back in the Togekiss, the question is, can Conkeldurr potentially bluff like it has Stone Edge even when it does not? Conkeldurr farms up a ton of energy, going for the Brutal Swing, able to get the shield from the opponent. Conkeldurr now just going to settle for the Brutal Swing. Brutal Swing never going to be shielded by the Togekiss. They know that cannot be enough damage. And back in comes Metagross to unleash Meteor Mash. Meteor Mash will be getting the final Protect Shield. Togekiss only actually ended up CMP tying. Aura Sphere will not take the knockout here, but it would put Metagross pretty low, so Metagross will put up the shield. But there's another Aura Sphere loaded for the Togekiss. Metagross not going to have a lot of health remaining after this lands. There's the pivot out into Skeledirge, and unfortunately Metagross is going to get KO'd. Metagross does make a Meteor Mash, but Meteor Mash is not a ton of damage onto the Skeledirge. In comes Golisopod. Could a catch potentially be in the cards here? Oh, went for the catch, but the opponent just has absolutely insane patience. They overfarmed predicting the catch, and now Golisopod is going to get hit with a Shadow Ball. Unfortunately, I believe the Togekiss is just going to be a little bit too healthy. Aqua Jet, I don't think is going to be enough to secure the knockout. Skeledirge will fall. Back in comes the Kiss. Yeah, and unfortunately, it's still in the green HP. A well-played game there by the opponent to get such a massive energy head start on Kiss, because that's what really allowed them to set up the game so well. One thing I do like about the new system, it has a lot of glitches, which I don't like, but I do enjoy the fact that you can top left in the middle of a charge move. Tough lead in the next match, Metagross into Garchomp. Metagross throws one Shadow Claw, save switches into Golisopod, and the Garchomp stays in to get some chip damage with Twister. Twister will connect, in comes King Gambit. The good news for Golisopod is Golisopod should still barely be outside of foul play range. Metal Sound doesn't really do a lot of fast attack pressure here, so Golisopod should actually be able to output some pretty nice damage onto King Gambit without having to give up a Protect Shield. Foul play lands, Golisopod is able to hang on, not by much, and now gets to fire off Aqua Jet number 2. Switch timer will be up. Will we see the switch to Conkeldurr? Yes! Conkeldurr hits the field and gets the 2 Force Palm farm down. So Conkeldurr is now up a decent amount of energy, and it's going to be a Metagross in the back. This is the exact scenario for which you put Shadow Conkeldurr on a team. Shadow Conkeldurr now just gets to absolutely spam out these Brutal Swings. The fact that it was up 2 Force Palms to begin with is going to make life miserable for the Metagross. When I ended up trying the non-Shadow Conkeldurr, my biggest complaint was that the Brutal Swings and Force Palms didn't add up enough on Metagross, but it appears that is not a problem whatsoever with the Shadow Conkeldurr. Shadow Conkeldurr now full sending Dynamic Punch, Garchomp no shields, and they're just getting farmed. Garchomp gets fully farmed down. Shadow Conkeldurr on an absolute rampage, gonna farm up back-to-back Brutal Swings, try for the catch. I'm pretty confident that Conkeldurr could have closed out the game by itself, but tried to go for the flashy play there, going for the catch onto the Golisopod. Metagross will be able to take the KO with Earthquake, but then they just don't have the residual energy needed to outpace Conkeldurr, as Conkeldurr did bank the back-to-back Brutal Swings from earlier in the game. First, will get the shield. Second, is going to be taking the knockout. And man, that game really felt like Shadow Conkeldurr just completely taking over to secure the win. We move to the next game, Metagross into Shadow Gyarados. A lot of Shadow Gyarados today, and none of them on Waterfall. I have seen a couple Gyarados on Waterfall. I do feel like Dragon Breath overall performs just a little bit better because of the amount of dragons in the meta, although I do see the appeal of Waterfall, because Waterfall should give Gyarados a better matchup into Metagross, and Metagross is obviously probably the most commonly used Pokemon in this entire meta. Can we see a catch onto the Golisopod? Oh, he goes 2 for 2. I absolutely love that catch. Aqua Tail is going to do nothing onto the Golisopod. Shadow Gyarados banks some energy and sends out Primarina. Unfortunately, Primarina is a complete wall to energy from the Golisopod. I imagine Aqua Jet will still do okay damage for being resisted. Yeah, Primarina's stats, unfortunately, are well known for not being amazing. So even though Golisopod is fully walled here, Golisopod is still putting up a pretty decent fight. Golisopod, even able to make a third Aqua Jet. Primarina overfarms too much, and that's going to mean they're going to exit the matchup at basically no HP remaining. I think a Hydro Cannon would not quite take the knockout here. Opponent goes for Disarming Voice, but they actually go for an Undercharge. They let Golisopod take the KO, presumably to get farm on one of their back Pokemon, and it's going to be the Shadow Gyarados. Conkeldurr looks for the farm down, but the opponent's play to Undercharge pays off as they're able to make an Aqua Tail. That Aqua Tail will force a shield from Conkeldurr in the back. You already know what's in back. The most popular Pokemon in the format, it's going to be Metagross. This game is over. If Conkeldurr was not at a shield disadvantage, Conkeldurr could just win it by itself. But since Conkeldurr is at a shield advantage, then the energy on Metagross is going to be needed to take home this win. Meteor Mash will be shielded. Conkeldurr can fire off another Brutal Swing, just pivot Metagross into the mirror, and the opponent just simply will not have a win condition. Even a Meteor Mash would come close to taking the knockout here, but if you have the energy, you may as well go for the Earthquake. So Metagross gets the full set of the Earthquake, knocking out the opposing Metagross and securing the win. We move to the next game. Metagross, in this game, going to be leading into a Primarina. Now, this is a pretty decent lead matchup for the Metagross. Metagross can't quite one-shot yet with the Meteor Mash, but Meteor Mash will set up a really nice Shadow Claw farm down. So, Metagross goes on the offensive. Meteor Mash is going to be no shielded. Oh, that's a really nice play. The catches of the Golisopod are just so on point in these sets. Able to catch the Hydro Cannon. Out comes Florges, so an ABA Fairy strategy from the opponent. I think that's actually a really interesting strategy, because if you're playing ABA Fairy and you lead into Metagross, then Primarina at least can do well enough that typically Primarina could mostly neutralize the Metagross, and then Florges presumably is free in the back. But by catching the Hydro Cannon, there is a very healthy Metagross, and that's going to make life very awkward for Florges. Florges fires off the Moonblast. There's a pivot into the Metagross. Metagross can't quite make the Meteor Mash before Florges is able to fire off the Chilling Water. Chilling Water will burn the switch timer. Back in comes the Primarina, and look at that 1 HP survive. The debuff from the Chilling Water paying dividends. Hydro Cannon lands, but it's actually Metagross this time with the 1 HP survive. Back in comes the Florges. Florges just looking to absorb energy from the Metagross and try and sweep with whatever they have in the back. In the back, they have their own Metagross, and this is once again going to be the Shadow Conkeldurr show. There is still a little bit of energy available on the Golisopod, if I'm not mistaken, but the Golisopod is very, very low. The good news is even just with the Force Palms, like this damage, I'm still not over how much damage this does. The regular Conkeldurr cannot do this. I tried it on stream. I was bitterly disappointed. I had such high hopes, and the regular Conkeldurr let me down, but the Shadow Conkeldurr, this damage is wicked. Able to farm up just shy of the back-to-back Brutal Swings. Even if Conkeldurr gets outpaced by the Metagross, I assume Golisopod will be able to close out the game, and Conkeldurr is just taking home the win. What a Pokemon. Shadow Conkeldurr taking knockouts left and right. Man, I really wish I had this Pokemon. We see a very laggy start to the next match, leading Metagross into Shadow Gyarados. Metagross definitely lost at least 1 Shadow Claw in there. Should have 7 Shadow Claws, but unfortunately only has 6. Metagross gonna massively overfarm, and what do you know? The catch on the Golisopod once again. Waterfall, Dragon Breath, it still doesn't matter. Golisopod is always gonna catch that Aqua Tail. Opponent sends in Metagross. Metagross would normally be considered a pretty advantageous matchup for Golisopod, but I honestly kind of see the vision with what the opponent is doing. They're very clearly just putting in a Pokemon that's very bulky that can survive 2 Aqua Jets, whereas maybe they have something in the back that would not be as big of a fan of taking this energy. Golisopod will not be able to quite take the knockout here with the Aqua Jet. It's going to be very, very close. The quick switch into Metagross is going to snipe them down. Back in comes the Gyarados, but the Metagross does have back-to-back Meteor Mashes. Did the opponent end up getting 1 Waterfall there or 2? I'll have to check. I believe they only got 1 through. Dude, the visuals are very, very weird in this game. I haven't the foggiest idea of how many fast moves they're at on this Gyarados. They end up pivoting out, sniping down with the Garchomp, and it's once again going to be Shadow Conkeldurr versus the world. If Shadow Conkeldurr is able to land a Dynamic Punch, that would be the pretty clear path to victory here. Garchomp will fire off the Twister. The shield comes up. Conkeldurr going to overfarm. Oh, and go for the catch. That could also be a way back in this game. Unbelievable catch there, absorbing the Twister, and now maybe Conkeldurr could even get away with a Brutal Swing. The Shadow Force Palms have done so much damage onto this Garchomp that Brutal Swing might just take the knockout, but you know what? He's not going to risk it. He's just going to go straight for Dynamic, because Dynamic will definitely KO. Dynamic Punch KOs the Garchomp. All that's left is going to be the Gyarados, and man, All these battles are doing are just giving me FOMO that I don't have a Shadow Conkeldurr. Hopping to the final match, Metagross into Dragonite, opponent save switches into Mamoswine, and Mamoswine is going to be instantly met with Meteor Mash. This is the Powder Snow Mamoswine as well, but unless they're running Stone Edge, they're about to be completely walled by Golisopod, and it appears that's a very quick final match for this video, as they are out of here. All in all, these were some very cool battles, so many thanks to Rob for the battle submission. I had heard whispers, rumors of Shadow Conkeldurr absolutely terrorizing teams, and I was very disappointed when I tried the regular Conkeldurr, and I felt that it really didn't do what I wanted it to do. Even in the Metagross matchup, the Force Palms plus Brutal Swings just didn't quite hit hard enough to where I could like win the 2-shield, for example. But after watching the Shadow Conkeldurr play, man, unfortunately, I just never found a Shadow Conkeldurr that was good enough IV to build for the Master League, so that's obviously a pretty rare thing to have, but if you have it, it looks to be a very serious threat. The fact that with Dynamic Punch and Brutal Swing, it has basically perfect coverage into the meta's 2 best Pokemon. Dynamic Punch gives you massive neutral damage into Garchomp and just lets you Force Palm it down if they ever end up no-shielding, and Brutal Swing obviously lets you hit 4 big super effective damage into Metagross. So as the meta is kind of settling into most teams having a Metagross and Garchomp just because of how strong that duo is, I think Shadow Conkeldurr is actually positioned very well in an anti-meta role. It's not going to be one of the most used instant top meta Pokemon, but I think it can rack up a lot of wins just by virtue of having really nice play into both sides of that very popular and very strong core. Now, I may be a little bit biased in this opinion because I have historically really enjoyed the Master Premier Cup, but I do feel like this is a really solid iteration of the Master Premier meta. I feel like every time the Master Premier meta shows up, it looks a little bit different. In previous iterations, Snorlax was everywhere, and now Snorlax has completely fallen out of the meta. But I do actually really think that the meta has developed in a pretty healthy way around Metagross and Garchomp. Metagross and Garchomp as a core, they have a lot of flexible play into each other, whereas even though Garchomp will typically beat Metagross, Metagross up a little bit of energy does have the ability to flip that. And then with that core pairing very, very well together, but also having play into each other, it sets up a lot of interesting Pokemon and interesting anti-meta niches, like the Shadow Conkeldurr, like we saw a decent amount of Goldengo. I think that low kick Rage Fish, Shadow Ball, Annihilate is also pretty well positioned. So even though it is a meta that has a very clear 2 best Pokemon that you can use, I do feel like there's still a lot of really interesting anti-meta that can rack up quite a lot of wins. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed watching today's video, please do help support the content by leaving a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't, and an extra special thank you as always to our channel members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide to the channel is so appreciated, so thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.